Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Vinny Politan. Great to have you with us tonight. And it is the time of the program where we take a look at crime stories from around the nation and get some insight and perspective from law enforcement professionals who we bring in here each and every night. Let me introduce tonight's guest. With us, former Assistant Director of Investigations and U.S. Marshal Service, Art Roderick is with us. Art has a combined 40 years in local and federal law enforcement, including 25 years as a U.S. Marshal, retiring as its Assistant Director for Investigations. He then served as a Senior Manager of both the Departments of Justice and Homeland Security. Also with us, retired Deputy Inspector of the NYPD, Corey Pegues is with us. Corey was in law enforcement for 26 years. He spent 14 years as a combat medic for the U.S. Army and New York National Guard. He's also a former professor and author of the book, Once a Cop, The Street, the Law, Two Worlds, and One Man. All right, Art, Corey, great to have you both on the program. Thanks so much for being here. This first story is intense. It comes to us from KATC down in Lafayette, Louisiana. A weapon goes off at an armed militia protest.
Around 4 o'clock, members of the NFAC, coming from all over the country, moved into the street in front of the library. Just before they took their first steps in their planned march, several gunshots could be heard coming from Park Sans-Souci, where the group was ultimately headed for the protest.
You know the rules of the game. Pay attention to my instructions. And remember what I said. We don't start nothing.
I'll go east side. A quick arrest was made, no one injured, when deputies say a Lafayette man's gun accidentally discharged. Another tense moment shortly thereafter as the group dropped to their knees yelling "sniper" as they noticed what appeared to be law enforcement staged on the roof of the Iberia Bank building.
Watch your back, Sammy. Watch your back.
Yo, let them come. Yo, let them come in. Yo, let them.
He's trigger happy. He's trigger happy.
They can't.
Sir?
Here's your militia.
Hey, look at me. They said.
The program was led by Grandmaster Jay, one-time presidential candidate, and the leader of the NFAC.
Because it seems like any other time y'all try to protest, they want to do stuff to you. They want to tear gas you and hit you over the head. Isn't it strange that when we come out, that doesn't happen? Nobody gets tear gas, nobody gets knocked over the head. I wonder why. You know why? Because you always look at power with power. Power respects power. And you all have the right to exercise the same power.
Protesters called for changes within the police department, especially in light of the most recent officer-involved shooting that led to the death of Trayford Pellerin.
Y'all ain't make no noise for this man that was shot down by the police simply because he tried to walk into a convenience store. That could have been you, or you.
It's been disrespect going on for a long time. It's going to be there. It's not going to change no time soon, I don't believe, but this is a start. But this is a demonstration of a start of how to try to get things done in a peaceful way.
All right, I've got a question. How did this situation not spiral out of control? We dropped the not out of there. Not because it did not spiral out of control. So let me ask you first, Art, you've got The armed militia protesting police, but police are there to keep order. A gun goes off, unrelated to the militia, but a gun goes off. Someone is arrested, and then the police vehicle is surrounded by some members of the militia after they arrest this man, and then there's a standoff as police are marching backwards. Unbelievable situation, but it did not spiral out of control. How did it not?
Yeah, Vinny, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this could have gone horribly wrong when you have dozens and dozens of people, even at a peaceful protest, carrying assault rifles, and you have an accidental discharge or a round goes off. A lot of times, the first thing that comes to mind is that outgoing or is it incoming? And it just harkens back to the Dallas shooting in July of 2016 when the 5 police officers were killed by the sniper. And you did not see that panic in this particular situation. And I think the officers handled it very well, and also NFAC handled it very well and tried to keep the situation under control. And I think this is a circumstance where you had de-escalation going on, and both parties accepting the de-escalation and allowing this protest to continue on even after the discharge of that weapon.
Yeah, Corey, this was so intense, but order was kept somehow, some way.
So let me just tell you, like art is hitting on all cylinders. When you're doing this type of thing, pre-planning plays a major part in this. You know, coming from the New York City Police Department, demonstrations all day, protests all day. Pre-planning is the key, and I'm so happy to see this video where you see that like both parties pre-plan. Not only NFAC, but the police department obviously isolated, contained, and it was very simple for them to find out where the accidental charge went off to get the individual that, you know, accidentally charged his weapon, grab him, and get him off this set before things got out of control. As you can see, all of those barriers. So pre-planning plays a major part. You can't do this stuff on an ad hoc basis. You have to pre-plan.
Art, put me in the shoes of the officers, because, you know, they're assigned to this detail. They know there's a lot at stake here, but the subject matter of the actual protest is them, right? They're the ones being protested, right? They're protesting police, yet police have to be there to help maintain order and help to keep people safe. Yeah. Put us in the shoes of those officers.
Yeah, it's a profession, Vinny, and what happens there is law enforcement realizes, you know, that the basis of this country is peaceful protests. And I think, as Corey had mentioned, the pre-planning in this, with the groups meeting each other and allowing each other to know what exactly is going on and what route they're going to take, help this. And I think law enforcement was actually able to immediately key on this individual that had the accidental discharge and contain the situation right away. And as Corey mentioned, had got him out of there as quickly as possible before crowds started gathering and the situation got out of control. But as a law enforcement officer, if they're able to identify this situation right away, it makes it a lot easier instead of trying to figure out, okay, where'd those rounds come from? Are we being shot at? Is somebody down? Does somebody need medical attention? You know, do we have to call in the SWAT team that is probably sitting nearby in case something like this happens? So it was handled very well by both parties in this particular case.
All right, we've got more crime time straight ahead, including a story out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Another officer-involved shooting investigation. We'll take a look at it when we return.
The suspect attacked the officer with an item in his hands. The officer fired 2 shots, striking the suspect.
Got an officer-involved shooting out of Salt Lake City. One of the stories we're covering tonight in Crime Time, where we bring in our law enforcement experts. Still with us tonight, folks, our experts, Art Roderick and Corey Pegee, standing by. Let's get to this story from KSTU in Salt Lake City. An officer-involved shooting investigated.
I believe the actions of our officers averted what could have been a tragic situation for our officer or one of the employees of this business this morning.
This all begins about 7:30 this morning when a burglary alarm sounded at the Amco transmission store on 31st Street and Wall Avenue. Right around that same time, a customer arrived and saw that a window had been broken out. Moments later, an Ogden PD officer responded and found a man hiding inside the building. He refused to comply with her commands to surrender. Then he became aggressive.
The suspect attacked the officer with an item in his hands. The officer fired 2 shots, striking the suspect.
After the man was down, the officer placed him into custody and performed first aid until paramedics arrived. He was then taken to a local hospital. That officer is now on paid administrative leave, pending the outcome of a critical incident investigation. But for now, officials are just glad she's okay.
Yeah, I thank God none of our officers were injured by all means. And obviously that's something that's on the mind of all our officers and all of us today. It's on the mind of a lot of family members of Officer Lyday today. I absolutely guarantee you that.
He's referring to May 28th. That's when Ogden Police Officer Nathan Lyday was shot and killed in the line of duty. He and another officer were responding to a domestic violence call where a female victim said she'd been beaten and was fearing for her life. Moments after Lyday and the other officer arrived on scene, they were met by gunfire coming through the front door. Officer Lyday was hit and died a short time later. Other officers returned fire on the gunman, John Coleman. Coleman was later found dead inside the home from a gunshot wound. He was apparently hit during that exchange of gunfire. The deputy chief says today's incident was all captured on the officer's body camera, and he says they hope to release that footage as soon as the OICI investigation by the DA is complete.
All right. Is being a police officer more dangerous than ever? You know, where we are right now. Corey Pegues, what do you think about what's happening right now around the nation? Do you think the danger level is higher than it's been before?
Well, I'll tell you this. I just spoke with a former police officer who was a cop in the 70s, where cops were actually being hunted to be killed back in the 70s. Today, let's just make the disclaimer that being a police officer is a dangerous profession. You gotta understand, it's the only profession where you get the right to use deadly physical force if deadly physical force is being used against you or someone else imminently. When I was a cop for 21 years, when I put my vest on and I put my shirt on, I said a popcorn prayer up to God that please let me get back home to my family. And that's what cops are doing all over the country. All the hundreds of thousands of cops, that's what they're doing every single day. But you can't go out on patrol and think that, you know, it might be the last time you're out there. You say your prayer, you go out there, and you give the community the best that you can give them. Because when you raise your hand, you're to protect property and preserve life. And is it a little more dangerous now? Maybe, but it's not the situation where it was like a few decades ago where cops was actually being hunted. I want to believe, and I guess I'm just being nice right now, I want to believe that the civilian sector are not going out to actually hunt to kill cops. But you do have one or two people that's a little crazy, and they actually go out to hunt and kill cops. But I think right now in America, it's as safe as it's ever been. I mean, the numbers don't lie. Crime is down across the country in the last 25 years. And even police-involved shooters are down, and police-involved shooters are down.
Art, how do you see this one?
You know, Corey's right, Vinny. When you go back to the 70s, it seems almost like every 25 years or so, we sort of go through this progression of where there's law enforcement officers that are being protested against, or law enforcement officers are being killed at a higher rate. Actually, in 2019, there was 48 officers killed by felonious means. This year so far, there's 52. So the numbers are up a little higher. But one kind of crazy stat that's only started being collected this year is we've had 118 officers die from COVID-19. So it is inherently a dangerous job. And I've been on both ends of this. I've actually investigated law enforcement officer shootings, and I've been investigated for a shooting. And let me tell you, doing either one is very stressful. In about 95, 96% of all shootings, law enforcement officers involved shootings around the country involve some type of weapon that the perpetrator is using against that police officer. So we're only talking about 40 or 50 shootings that are questionable each year when you look at that there are 10 million felony arrests every year in this country, and we're talking about maybe 1,000 shootings. So the stats are very low. I agree with Corey. They're very low, but being a law enforcement officer is inherently a dangerous job.
Final story tonight comes from WEWS in Cleveland. A documentary offers clues in a mother's murder.
Elizabeth Travis loves to watch crime shows, but never did she think one would lead her on a mission to solve a mystery that has haunted her for years.
I just hope I get closure. I hope that this comes to an end for me. It's been a long time.
Just recently, the 35-year-old was watching a Samuel Little documentary. He is the serial killer who grew up in Lorraine.
The story he told about the young lady he picked up in Cleveland and threw her body out on the side of the road was the same story I've been hearing all my life.
It was New Year's Eve 1987. Her mother, Luana Alexander, was at a Cleveland bar. Hours later on New Year's Day, she was found in the middle of Interstate 77 in Copley Township. She died 4 months later.
What I was told is that she was a drug addict and a prostitute, and that she was doing what she do and happened to find herself in the wrong car.
After watching the documentary, Travis made a startling discovery.
I go on the FBI website and I'm looking at all of these photos, and then I pull my mom's photo out because I keep it on my phone.
On the FBI's website are sketches drawn by Little of the women he admitted to killing.
The FBI says some people have recognized family members from those sketches. Travis is sure she's one of them. We brought her mother's picture here to the FBI.
It does seem like it has a very strong resemblance to the picture that he drew. Sam Little is from this area. He has been tied to a murder in Lorraine. I believe he's suspected in one in Willoughby Hills. So it is quite possible. It's something that we definitely need to look into.
Elizabeth Travis was raised by a relative in New York. She picked up everything and just moved to Cleveland to be closer to her mother's family.
It's like they put her in the dirt and they forgot about her.
But she is no closer to finding answers.
They didn't even know where she was buried. She doesn't even have a headstone. It's just like I'm just out in this world alone.
Heartbroken but determined. Travis told me she wants a meeting with Little.
Just sit and bring my picture, and we don't have much to talk about. It's a simple question. Is this her?
A question she desperately wants answered.
All right, what is the best way to determine if he is the killer? Corey, what's your take on the best way for confirmation here?
Well, the first thing we need to do is get a cold case squad. You need to get some seasoned detectives that need to go back. We're talking about 1987. So you need to get somebody, or she was a prostitute and a drug addict. So maybe she had a pimp. We need to maybe go and get the pimp, debrief the pimp, find out who was selling drugs at that time. It's going to be a very tedious process. We're talking about 30 years, but we can actually solve the case if we do due diligence, but you got to make sure you have dedicated detectives that's actually going to put feet to the ground, knock on doors all over that area where she was found to try to bring closure. And last thing, there's two things that people love to hear from the police. One is going to be, I found your family member safely, or the second piece is, we solved the case. And I hope, for God, in this instance,
that we
can give her some closure.
Yeah. All right, we only have like 10 seconds here, literally. Your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, this Mr. Little here has been classified as one of the more prolific serial killers. So the Bureau has a great way of tracing where they've been in their past, all their travels, to figure out if he was in that particular area when this crime was committed. And that's one way they can figure out if they can solve this case.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it. More ahead.